Ah, Texas. 850 miles from Orange to El Paso, 900 miles from Brownsville to Texan, and thousands upon thousands of highways and dirt roads in the middle. Exploring Texas ain't no small vacation, friend. It's a lifetime endeavor. But what if you don't have years, but just one single day? Well, that's where we come in. From the well-known landmarks to the completely obscure dives and hideaways, and all within a day's reach. So let's hit the road. I'm Chet Garner, and this is The Day Tripper. This episode was made for y'all with the help of our awesome partners. Check the caption for more info.
Okay, let's talk Texas history. I say remember thee, you say Alamo! Ah, very good. That was an easy one, right? But during the Texas Revolution, that wasn't the only battle cry. There was another city that played just as important of a role as the Alamo. So get ready, because today we remember Goliad!
Goliad is 90 miles southeast of San Antonio and 120 miles south of Austin, a part of Texas few ever tread. But for those that do, especially Texas history buffs, the road to Goliad is well worth traveling. But I don't just want to hit the road into town, I want to hit the river into town. So I'm hitting the Goliad Paddling Trail, a 6.6 mile stretch of the San Antonio River, starting just beneath Highway 59. Canoe rentals are impossible to find out here, so you gotta bring your own. Or just have canoeing friends like my buddies Brandon, Travis, and Richard. These guys are my experts today, and this 6.5 miles should be a breeze.
So what's the craziest thing you've ever seen in a river? Probably an alligator swimming across the river. You know, pretty far upriver too, like near Gonzales. You don't think of an alligator, but dude, Gonzales is like right there.
I know.
All right, well maybe we'll see an alligator. This will be fun, man. Thanks for coming with us, dude. Appreciate it.
And we're off.
Voyage begins.
Next stop, Goliad. In this part of Texas, the San Antonio River is a completely natural river, uninhibited by flood dams and for the most part, totally unchanged by man, which stands in sharp contrast to upstream, where the river feeds through the San Antonio Riverwalk. Now I love the Riverwalk, but today I much prefer being out here in this stretch of beautiful, quiet Texas. This riparian corridor where the earth meets water is incredibly diverse. Large cypress, willow, and sycamore trees shade the river, and wildlife is everywhere. And while there are plenty of reptiles, there's absolutely no sign of gators. And unlike my last canoe trip in Beaumont, chances are pretty slim we'll see Bigfoot. In this part of Texas, we're much more likely to see a member of the area's native chupacabra population. Just don't try to pet one. They do bite, just a little bit. But regardless of whether you see the elusive goat sucker, there's way more than enough out here to keep things interesting.
Look at this thing. That is the most gigantic clamshell I've ever seen. Too bad these things aren't pearls. Think fast.
And my buddy Travis is intent on finding a rope swing. Or vine swing. But eventually we find one that's tried and true, hanging beneath this old railroad bridge. And you better believe we are all getting in on this action.
Round two.
This goes down as one of the greatest rope swings of all time, despite not having the giant splash at the end. You know, you don't always have to go swimming when you go canoeing, although Travis can't seem to help himself. I think what I love most about canoeing is that while it's always the same sport, you do it in a different part of Texas and it feels completely new again. We owe a huge debt of gratitude to Texas Parks and Wildlife for creating and managing these paddling trails. And this one here in Goliad is a great one. But all good things must end, and we've just arrived at Goliad State Park.
Man, that was a fun ride. Good water, one of the best rope swings I've ever had, but this day's just getting started.
Time to say bye to my canoeing buds and hit the town. Goliad is a quintessential Texas small town with a population around 2,000 folks. But the way Goliad looks today is only a small glimpse into who Goliad really is. Yes, to truly understand the town of Goliad, you must go back, way back, before there was a Texas and even before there was a Mexico. This town has history around every corner and in every plaza.
Goliad is a town steeped in history, from Spanish rule to the Texas Revolution all the way up to modern times, like this courthouse, built in 1894. Yeah, for Goliad, that's pretty recent.
And even older than Goliad's amazing courthouse is this massive live oak on the courthouse lawn, which for decades served as the town's hanging tree. Court was often held in its shade and the sentences carried out immediately. Appeals? Yeah, right. This was Wild West justice. But we've got the rest of the day to dig into Goliad's history. That canoe trip worked up one fierce appetite, and it's time for some lunch. This is the Blue Quail Deli, a soup and sandwich shop on the square, always packed with locals looking for a tasty, well-made sandwich, of course, but also seeking a cup of soup that's as famous as the town. Blue Quail's award-winning cream of jalapeno soup. And it turns out you can't even walk in the door without ordering it.
Yeah, the jalapeno soup's amazing.
Yeah, no
and you can see it's on mugs and t-shirts, and
Yeah.
it's their famous soup. So
Yeah.
Yes, it's very good. It's worth coming to Goliad for.
Just for the soup.
Just for the soup.
No matter what sandwich.
No.
It
no
comes
matter.
with the
It
cream of
comes-
jalapeno
It comes
soup.
with the soup. It is a must.
You know, we started ordering our food. She says, you have to get the soup. We're like, she brought over some samples of it, and all three of us were like, okay, yeah, we'll take the soup. Yeah.
It doesn't seem to be an option. You know,
Right.
the soup usually is like an ad.
You get the soup and then a different kind of sandwich.
Whatever else you
Yeah,
want.
right.
Is it spicy?
Sometimes it makes you tear up, and sometimes it's just right.
Everyone loves Blue Quail Deli, including one of Goliad's most beloved citizens, former Houston Oilers coach, Bum Phillips. You're Goliad native now.
Yeah, 16-year native.
16 years.
Yeah.
You live out in the city or out in the country?
I live 16 miles out.
16 miles out.
Yeah.
That's great. What do you think about Goliad?
Oh, I love it. We look all over Texas, and this is the place we figured it was the best place to live.
And today, Coach Phillips even brought some friends.
So another man I did not expect to find in Goliad, Mr. McCoy, thank you. Thanks for talking to us.
Small world.
I know, no kidding. Well, what brings you to Goliad?
We've had a great morning here at the school system, and then they came and bought lunch for me, so I'm in pretty good shape.
That's good. That's good. First time here?
Actually, no. Actually, I ate here once before, so this is my second time. Been
Okay.
good both times.
Yeah, it's been good both. Hey, 2 for 2. Not
right.
so bad. Whoa, I got caught up talking and am now officially starving. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna need the soup and the sandwich.
Wow, this looks delicious. It's cool to walk into little places like this off the square, and it's cool to find something other than barbecue. I got a deli club, homemade wheat bread, ham, turkey, really good wheat bread. Blue Quail Deli actually makes all their white and wheat bread in-house. It's good. And then the homemade cream of jalapeno soup. Wow. Similar to maybe a cream of broccoli soup, but it's spicy because it has jalapenos in it. Really cheesy. The jalapeno hits you up front, but then it kind of disappears with the creaminess of the soup, leaving this que bueno taste in my mouth. The jalapenos. So good, so good. You think I could dip the sandwich in the soup? I think I will. That is delicious. Are you kidding me? How could that be bad? This is great. And I think I'm about ready to go and explore Goliad. But first, I'm gonna finish this soup.
Now, after I'm well fed, it's time to dive headfirst into the history of Goliad. So let's start at the beginning. All the way to the year of our Lord, 1749. It was this year that Franciscan monks from Spain established Mission Espiritu Santo here in Goliad. Charged with spreading the gospel of Christ, these men of the cloth boldly traveled into the uncharted frontier, often risking their lives to accomplish their mission and to build incredible missions like Espiritu Santo. Today, this immaculate piece of history sits inside of Goliad State Park. To learn more, I found some help.
Okay, so this is Beth, who is an interpretive park ranger here at Goliad State Park, and she's going to show us around Mission Espiritu Santo,
Yes.
which is short for...
Nuestra Señora del Espíritu Santo de Zúñiga.
I'm going to let her say that.
First established in 1722 near Matagorda Bay, Mission Espiritu Santo moved to this location in 1749, where it operated for 81 years.
When the missionaries got here, they realized this was the perfect spot to locate this mission. The population here ranged anywhere from 300 people to fewer than 50.
The Spanish abandoned this mission in the 1830s, and for a century it literally fell to pieces. That is until the CCC and later Texas Parks and Wildlife restored her to her current day and past beauty.
We want people, when they walk in the chapel doors, we want them to feel like they have stepped back 250 years.
It works. I can vouch for that.
This chapel truly gives visitors a glimpse back in time to what life was like in an 18th century Spanish mission. And the Park Museum goes even further.
This is a representation of what the mission looked like at its height.
Wow.
We've got the chapel here. Around the interior perimeter were the jacales, the homes of the Native Americans. This wall was originally 10 to 12 feet in height.
Wow.
They had a bastion in each corner that had a cannon to help protect against the Apache and the Comanche.
So while the town's official fort was down the road, which we'll get to, the mission often had to play fort to protect its people. Among the artifacts inside the museum are an old copper still and a sundial.
It's a wonderful example of the interaction of two different cultures with two totally different mindsets. The Spanish are like we are, obsessed with time, all the way down to minutes and seconds.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Well,
you got 10 seconds left, so wrap it up.
Okay, I'm sorry. The Native Americans are aware of time as well, but on a totally different scale. They were worried about the changes of the moon, the changes of the season. You can imagine how difficult it was for them to understand the Spaniards' obsession with, we have to do things now at this time, and the frustration of the Spaniards dealing with people who are going, what's your hurry?
Yeah.
But despite any cultural differences, Espiritu Santo was hugely successful at raising cows and holds claim to being the birthplace of Texas ranching.
We are the first mega ranch in Texas. People want to say it's the King Ranch. No, we beat the King Ranch by 100 years.
Well done.
We get asked quite often, were these missions a success or a failure? And it really depends on your perspective. If you're a Spaniard today, it's a failure. Spain doesn't own this land. We are not Spanish citizens.
Right.
On the other hand, and I think this is much more important, the New World Hispanic culture was born out of missions just like this one.
So the roots run deeper, much deeper than just the flag that's flying over the land.
Yes, yes.
That's really neat.
I like to describe these missions as the cradle of the New World Hispanic culture.
That's cool. People often don't think about that.
No, they don't.
So Texas owes a great deal of its modern-day Spanish culture to missions like Espiritu Santo. But we perhaps owe an even greater part of our Texas culture to a place just down the road.
We now interrupt this programming to remind you to like and subscribe. Now back to the road.
You know, so many remember the Alamo, but too few remember Goliad. This is Presidio La Bahia, the historic location of the Goliad Massacre, but a place that goes back much further than the Texas Revolution. Presidio is Spanish for fort, and while Mission Espiritu Santo was for outreach, Presidio La Bahia was for protection. The Presidio has had a number of important roles in both Spanish, Mexican, and Texan history, and during its time as part of Mexico, La Bahia was the birthplace of one of Mexico's greatest heroes, General Ignacio Zaragoza, the hero of Cinco de Mayo. Born here in an adobe house in 1829, Ignacio moved to Matamoros, Mexico before the Texas Revolution and became a general in the Mexican army. And on May 5, 1862, his outnumbered troops fought back the invading French superpower in the Battle of Puebla, the victory we all celebrate today as Cinco de Mayo. As you see, Goliad's history is incredibly rich. but also incredibly complex, which is why they need all these museums to explain it. But back to the Presidio. Inside its museum, visitors get an in-depth look at the nations, people, and artifacts that have inhabited Presidio La Bahia. Today, the fort's walls stand as they did back in the 1700s. But this wasn't always true, and for over a century following the Texas Revolution, the Presidio was neglected and fell to pieces. It was in ruins until the 1960s when Mrs. Catherine O'Connor decided to raise and spend millions on the restoration. Because of this incredible generosity, visitors can now walk the walls of the old fort and look out from the turrets that help protect the people of La Bahia.
Protect the fort at all costs.
Wow. The only part of the Presidio not rebuilt, because it never fell down, is the Our Lady of Loreto Chapel, which is still an active chapel and continues to hold services today. While the Spanish and Mexican history of La Bahia is incredibly interesting, it pales in comparison to the Texas history.
This cannon, believed to have been used by Colonel James Walker Fannin and his men during the Texas Revolution, was excavated from inside the Presidio walls in 1936. Wow. Piece of Texas history right there.
In the fight for Texas independence from Mexico, the Texian army took control of this Presidio. It was renamed Fort Defiance and came under the leadership of Colonel James W. Fannin. Fannin was from Georgia. He had attended West Point but dropped out and eventually moved to Texas. Over time, he was appointed a colonel in the Texian army. However, Fannin's leadership was often plagued with indecision and poor judgment, leading many historians to conclude that he may not have been the best man for the job. Nevertheless, Colonel Fannin was the officer in charge on that fateful day when he and his brave men lost their lives for Texas in the Goliad Massacre. But to tell that story properly, we must take a quick detour from the Presidio to the nearby town of Fannin, Texas.
The story of the Goliad Massacre doesn't actually start in Goliad, but here on the Fannin battleground, where Colonel James W. Fannin and his men surrendered to the Mexican army.
After the fall of the Alamo, Fannin and his men attempted to retreat from La Bahia to join Sam Houston. However, they showed no signs of haste as they made a leisurely retreat across the prairie. But General Urrea and his Mexican troops were in hot pursuit and eventually caught up with Fannin and his men here on this field. While the outnumbered Texans fought hard and were able to hold position against a much larger army, many, including Fannin, were wounded in the fight. The long, drawn-out skirmish ended in a Texian surrender. Fannin and his surviving men were marched back to Presidio La Bahia to await their fate. For a week, the men were held captive in this chapel, waiting patiently but confident that if they just waited longer, they would be released. General Urrea did ask Santa Anna that the men be granted clemency. However, after suffering huge losses at the Alamo, Santa Anna was in no mood for mercy and ordered that all prisoners be executed. On Palm Sunday, March 27, 1836, the men were placed into 3 columns and marched beyond the fort walls. Each column took its own direction from the Presidio, escorted on each side by a row of Mexican soldiers. The marching ceased, and from point-blank range, the Mexican soldiers opened fire on the unarmed Texians. The wounded men, including Colonel Fannin, were executed one by one here in this courtyard. Fannin was the last to die. After seeing all his men killed, the wounded Fannin was set in a chair. And as he awaited death, legend says he made 3 requests. That his personal belongings go to his family, that he be shot in the heart, not the face, and that he receive a Christian burial. Soldiers proceeded to take his belongings, they shot him in the face, and they burned his body. 342 men lost their life that day in the Goliad Massacre. Months later, after Texas won the revolution, General Thomas Rusk and his men returned to Goliad. They picked up the bones of Fannin and his men and buried them here. That Palm Sunday was one of the darkest days in Texas history. The story of Goliad and Presidio La Bahia is a sad one. War can bring out the worst in men, but the bravery it brings forth is strong enough to literally change the course of history. These men lost their lives, but inspired an army to fight harder and stronger as they shouted, "Remember Goliad" on the San Jacinto battlefield. Without this sacrifice, it's impossible to say whether or not Texans would have won at San Jacinto. So for these men, and for my state, I shall forever remember Goliad. Amazing Texas history standing right beside incredible Mexican history. 2 countries, 1 location. The cultures of Texas and Mexico mixed together to form one intricate Tex-Mex story. Tex-Mex. And at this hour, I can't think of anything more appropriate to honor these rich traditions than with a giant combo plate of Tex-Mex. And no restaurant could be more appropriately named than La Bahia Restaurant and Cantina. This spot has been a Goliad staple for decades. La Bahia closed for a spell, but recently reopened under the guidance of longtime cook Mr. Durantes, using the same time-tested recipes that have kept La Bahia around for so long, and serving the same time-tested Tex-Mex classics. For a Texas boy like me, a plate of warm Tex-Mex is as familiar and comforting as any country cooking.
Wow. I guess this is all mine. The La Bahia Special. Bean and cheese chalupa, how could you go wrong? And this, shredded chicken guacamole chalupa. Plate number 2, rice, beans, and cheese enchiladas. Delicious. The guacamole is really good. Just good, classic Tex-Mex. Comforting cheese enchiladas, the kind that I grew up on. Cheesy, gravy-covered enchiladas, chalupas, tacos, rice, and beans. And you know, as you can probably tell, I'm not Mexican, but I am a Texan. And in a lot of ways, this is home for me. And I gotta eat right, because I may have a very long night ahead of me. Now, this may look like the end of my day trip, but I got something very special in store. So sit tight and hold on to your britches.
A long night, indeed. Now I know this is the day tripper, but how could I pass up a chance to do a little night tripping inside of the Presidio La Bahia? You see, by day, it's a historical fort, but by night, it's a single suite hotel, where guests sleep inside of the old priests and officers' quarters. And as soon as the sun goes down, the tour guides and the public depart, leaving us with complete and total reign of Presidio La Bahia. But I should clarify, you see, we're not completely alone. And as you can imagine, when a place like this has been through something as bloody as the Goliad Massacre, things are never quite the same. And more than history resides within these walls. Among the tales are stories of infants screaming, a woman in white wandering the grounds, and a friar chanting Latin prayers as he paces the chapel. Now, we are not a crew of ghost hunters, but the stories the locals tell of Presidio La Bahia will make you wonder and send goosebumps straight up your spine. This is a day trip I'll never forget. Whether it's for the canoeing, the soup, the people, or the history, I shall forever remember Goliad.
This is absolutely incredible. I haven't seen any ghosts yet. The night is still young, so I'll see all y'all out on the road if I survive. Vaya con Dios, amigos. What was that? Seriously, what was that? Did y'all see that?
The story of the Goliad Massacre doesn't actually start in Goliad, but here in Fannin, Texas on the Fannin battleground, where Colonel Fannin and his Fannin army and his Fannin men came to Fannin. It's hot out here. Can I get a Fannin? Me.
Fight them! They're everywhere! This is where you die. Vaya con Dios, amigos.
And I gotta eat right, because we may have a very long night ahead of us. I might, because I may have a very long night. But before we do what we're doing tonight, wait, sorry. I got a little something special in store. And you're, if I lose it, I'm gone, wait. And I gotta eat right, because this, because this may be,
Howdy, y'all. Follow along with my adventures at Chet Tripper on Instagram and at The Day Tripper TV on Facebook and YouTube. Or head to thedaytripper.com for travel guides, past episodes, and info on our mobile app and Team Day Tripper.
This episode was made for y'all with the help of our awesome partners. Check the caption for more info. Howdy, y'all. Chet the Day Tripper here. Thanks so much for tripping with us. Remember, while you're here, like this video, subscribe to our channel so that we can stay out there on the road and keep on tripping. Did we miss anything in this town? Leave us a comment, let us know. We love finding out about new stops with all of your tips. And if you love Epic Texas Day Trips, remember to check our channel. We got a lot of them on there. Also, don't forget, if you want some sweet Day Tripper merch or another cool Texas-made product, come see us in Georgetown at the Day Tripper World Headquarters. You can also shop online if you check the link down there in the caption. All right, y'all. Bye con Dios, amigos.